Excellent. Okay, so welcome everyone. I hope you all had a good week and happy Wednesday, middle of the week for some of us, maybe a little bit longer for some to go. I am joined by Sue Williamson today, author, pet groomer, Tellington T-Touch practitioner. So it's really nice that you reached out to us and asked if we can have this little chat so we can help others with their grooming practices. So welcome, Sue. How are you?
Thank you. I'm absolutely fine. Thank you.
Yeah.
Had a nice steady day today. Yes, we managed to avoid the COVID despite my mum having it just before Christmas and my son having it just after. So we just managed to avoid everybody and keep clear, touch wood. So how about you? Was your Christmas good?
Yeah, it was good, but we didn't avoid COVID.
Oh, no.
So Emma tested positive on Christmas Day, but she was fine. Had a bit of a cold, and it was fine. But yeah, it was a quiet Christmas, which was nice. So we're on StreamYard tonight, and we were struggling a bit with the Zoom signal, so we've transferred over. So just bear with us if we cross over, because there's a little bit of delay on the signal. So yeah, tell us all about yourself, Sue. How did you get into the world of pets?
Well, I've loved dogs as long as I can remember. When I was about 4 years old, a relative gave me a toy poodle, a little black toy poodle called Tina, and that was it. I was just hooked on dogs then. I'd always liked dogs beforehand, but having my own pet, my own dog was just such a major thing for me. And of course, she was a poodle, so she needed lots of coat care. And basically, I took, even at a really young age, I took on looking after her coats. And my auntie also had 3 miniature poodles. And during the summer holidays, when they went on holiday, we had their 3 poodles as well. So it was absolutely, my dream, being surrounded by poodles or any sort of dog, to be quite honest. And I decided then I'd like to be a dog groomer, but I was told it's not a proper job. So as I grew up, I decided that I was really good at things like typing and organisation. So I went to train to be a secretary, personal assistant. And I did that for about 6 years until I started my family. Then I took quite a chunk out of time when I was bringing my boys up. And I started working at a university in one of the faculties looking after the research projects. I did that for 24 years. I'm a bit of a sticker at things. But then I had breast cancer and I had surgery and radiotherapy, but I never got back into normal work, and I just couldn't fit in again. So one day I just decided I was going to hand my notice in. Very brave of me. It's not like me at all. So I handed my notice in, and my husband said, well, what are you going to do now? Then you can't sit at home all day. And I said, I'm going to be a dog groomer. He said, well, we don't know how to groom a dog. I said, well, I'll learn then. So I went on a 60-day course with Francine Bennett at LA Spa and Groom. And it was such a wonderful experience. I, got my hands on so many dogs, so many different breeds. And then as soon as I finished my training, I went straight into the grooming. But before that, I'd already done my Tellington T-Touch training. I'd done puppy training classes. So I already knew quite a lot about behaviour and what sort of things to look for to know that dogs were getting anxious. So I was able to incorporate that into the grooming. And I noticed quite quickly that taking a different approach to the way most groomers groom, most groomers groom on a high table with the restraints on or the safety aids on. And that just wasn't for me, because I knew, because of the dog's behaviour on the table and the calming signals they were giving me, I knew that they weren't happy in that environment. So I started changing the way I groom to incorporate the behaviour side as well. So quite quickly, I stopped using the safety aids, danger. But what I do, I groom on a low table most of the time. So I've got my table at its lowest setting and I sit on a little stool and it's all magical and fairy-like.
If really, is it?
Honestly, when I sit there in my salon some days, I think to myself, am I actually dreaming this? Because it's so relaxing. I have some Guardians Day because I get people coming from I've got one lady that does an 120-mile trip. I can't send her home or out. So she stays. We take all the necessary COVID precautions. And it just makes for such a more relaxing environment. And even the clients that stay say how relaxing my cabin is. I don't get stressed, so the dogs stay as calm as possible, and by using the T-touch on them, giving them lots of choices. So because I've got my table, I've got a set of caravan steps I've covered with carpet, and the dogs know if it gets too much for them, they just get off the table. Most of them just go to the door, check that their owner's not come back, and then come back and get straight back on the table. So it gives them a get out for when they're feeling a little bit, I can't cope with this at the minute. Instead of having to resort to biting or snarling or growling at me, they just get off the table. So we never really get to that position where it gets stressful for us.
Awesome. So let's just go back before you were grooming, and you did a lot of behaviourist work. What behavioural work did you do? And then we'll talk about the Tellington T-touch as well.
Yeah, so I've got a diploma in canine behaviour and psychology. So that's learning all about how a dog processes information, about calming signals, trigger stacking, interpreting the behaviour, watching the body language. So I did consults with clients. I was able to work with clients. So that was a lot of that was dealing with dogs that don't like people or other dogs. So that was all about bringing the dog's stress levels down to start with, using something called ACE-free work, which I use a lot in the cabin as well, which is just lots of different surfaces, such as snuffle mats, licking mats, screwed up towels. And you just put different sorts of treats on all of them, and the dog just goes and does its thing while you just observe them. And by observing, you can pick up any issues they have. So you get some dogs that won't walk on different surfaces. They'll avoid walking on the towel, for example. I saw
this in the police when I'd go out with some of the dog handlers. You know, these big, like, broody German shepherds, like they're going to take down these criminals, and then we'd go into like a school with parquet flooring. And the German Shepherd would be like, right, where am I going? Get to the parquet flooring, put the brakes on. I'm not touching that. It's too shiny and slippery. I'm not going. I'm like, come on. You're like this big brute of a shepherd trying to go and find the criminal. And you're like tiptoeing across the parquet flooring. It was amazing to watch, like how much it just stopped them in their tracks, sort of thing.
Yeah, it's and that, when you think about it, you wouldn't necessarily think that had any impact on grooming, but when you think about it, the bath, the different textures of the bath surface, your table that's got a bobbly sort of feeling, the floor in your salon, so all these can have a massive impact on the dog if they don't like that type of flooring, or they don't like how the table feels on the paws. You know, to be like us going and standing on a pebbly beach if we were sensitive on our feet. And it just makes it a little bit more unpleasant. So it's thinking, you know, I try and think about if the dog's looking upset, why, what could be causing that issue for them? And that's where free work comes in a lot, because all clients that come to me, they have to do a free work session before I'll even touch the dog, let alone groom it. So I can start to pay attention to which surfaces they avoid. Some of them don't, they just charge in and go everywhere and eat all the food. And I pay attention to what sort of food they eat. Do they prefer eating the crunchy treats? Do they prefer doing licking? And then I can use that during the grooms if I need to counter condition or have a little bit of distraction sometimes. So I incorporate.
when you're doing the sort of, so we all have a bath, obviously, in the dog groomers. How do you have like different mats to put in your baths to see what the dogs prefer, or there's not a load of choice of baths out there. So how do you get?
So for most dogs actually don't bother about the texture, but for those that do, including one of my own, I put a towel down. So a towel goes over, so it's a little bit softer on the feet. It's an older dog, he's getting on, so he's probably just a bit sensitive on his paws. So sometimes just by simply putting a towel over the base, or even a human bath mat. So it's because I know some of the plasticky ones, they can be quite slippy. For dogs that have got things like hip dysplasia, arthritis, the slippier surfaces make them feel really unstable and uncomfortable. So by putting something in the bottom of the bath that reduces that slipping about, if you've got a plastic bath, that can make a big difference to some dogs because it gives them that stability.
And you say about looking for signs of a dog being upset. What are the common signs that you'll see in a dog when they're like, oh, I'm a bit not sure about this, or I'm not happy about this?
Okay, so there's various levels of there's signals called calming signals, and they're things like the dog licking its mouth, licking its lips, the whale eye where you can see the white of the eye. Slow blinking can also be a sign. Yawning is a big sign that they're getting stressed. It's not always that they're tired. It's a lot of. I had a dog in fact, the Bichon I had in today. He doesn't like having his face groomed. So if I do 2 or 3, 4 bits of scissoring, he'll yawn because it's getting too much for him. A big one that a lot of people don't realise is the paw lift. They'll lift one of the front paws up, and a lot of groomers think that's the just offering the paw, so they'll take the paw thinking of it being offered, but it's not. If the dog just picks its paw up, that's often a sign that he's steady on. I'm not quite happy about this. Anything where any part of the body turns away, so if they do a head turn where they're not, they're just doing this, or the whole body will sometimes turn. They're your sort of lower ones, but they're the ones I pay attention to, because if I can stop the dog's anxiety escalating, I can prevent all the other ones, because once they get to a certain stage, that's where you start to get the growling, the lip curling, the air snapping, even the bites. So it's keeping everything nice and calm at the lower levels so that it doesn't escalate to the more severe, I'm really fed up with you now, stop doing it. So it's really, really important, I think, to teach calming signals or stress indicators in training schools. It really should be taught, because that can make the difference between a bite and not a bite. Often when I see videos on Facebook where the bite's included as well, and the groomer often says, oh, the bite came out of nowhere, but when you watch the video, you can see the little signs, and then they get bigger, and then they start the air snapping, and then it goes to the bite, obviously. So by learning about calming signals and body language, it would save so many bites.
So could this be something that we could be including in our puppy packages, working on making sure our puppies are calm when they're coming into the salon, and even highlighting this sort of stuff to the owners, because quite a lot of the owners won't appreciate any of this, like you said.
Yeah. So both my books, the Taking the Grr Out of the Grooming Salon and Taking the Grr Out of Grooming Your Dog, they both include calming signals. And it includes information about trigger stacking, how to observe your dog, what things to look out for. And it also talks about the autonomic nervous system, which is the nervous system is the one that causes the fight, the flight, fall around. So the autonomic nervous system, I've got my false teeth in tonight, has got 2 parts. It's got your parasympathetic nervous system, which we're in now. It's where you do everything automatically. It's the rest digest, breathe and breed. So it takes care of a body on a day-to-day basis, because if we had to think about doing every little thing all the time, our brain would just explode, you know. We wouldn't have capacity to do anything else. So that's the parasympathetic nervous system. And then you've got the sympathetic nervous system, which is the side that kicks in when you start to get anxious. And that is responsible for the fight, flight, fall around, faint and freeze. So the idea is, with the way I groom, is to keep the dog in that parasympathetic nervous system, keep the dog nice and calm, so it can, because the other thing is, if the dog is in the sympathetic nervous system, they can't learn positive stuff. They just digest all the negative stuff. So an example I often give is, when I was a child, we were on holiday and we were in a caravan that hadn't got a toilet. It was that long ago, and there was a toilet block on the campsite, and we all used to go to the toilet block before we went to bed. And I went in one night with my mum and my sister, and as I went in, a moth flew and hit me on my head. Of course, I screamed, which is a sympathetic nervous system response. I didn't stand there and think, oh, I'm going to scream. It just happens. When I came out the toilet, my dad was there. He says, what were you screaming at? And I says, a moth hit me. And he told me off for that. Now, I can't remember anything else of that holiday other than that moth and being told off for screaming. So I absorbed that really quickly. And that stuck with me for 40 odd years. So that's what happens when you're in your sympathetic nervous system. The bad stuff stays with us. So that's why it's really important to, if we want to work with the dogs, if we want to keep them calm, it's really important to make sure they're in the parasympathetic nervous system all the time, where they can learn.
Yeah.
So going back to your puppies.
Yeah, go on.
Sorry, carry on.
Go back to the puppies.
Yeah. So with puppies, in fact, I work the same whether it's a puppy or an adult dog, because I only take dogs that are referred to me now from other groomers or behaviourists or vets. So I treat them all as if they're puppies and never been into a grooming salon before. And the first session is always the ACE-free work I was talking about, where I put all the different surfaces down. And that's all they do on the first session. Puppies usually adapt to it a lot quicker than the dogs that have got a negative memory of being groomed. So the puppies get to do the free work, and that's it for the first session. I get to talk to the guardian as well, talk about what the dog's like and what the puppy's like, and what, if they've got having any issues with it at home around the grooming. They also get a copy of my book, obviously. And then the next session really depends on how they coped at the first session. So for some, that the second session is a little bit more free work, but introducing things like the sound of the dryer in the distance, or I'll put the clippers on but not put the clippers near them, or pop them in the bath, just switch the water on, switch the water off, out the bath again. So it's, with puppies and the older dogs, obviously, it's all about introducing everything at a pace they can cope with. So I've got some awesome dogs now to groom that I've groomed since a puppy, and they're by far the easiest because they've grown up with the consent-based type grooming. So I can do pretty much anything to most of those now. Some of the ones that have been referred to me take a little bit longer because we've got to undo their memories and counterbalance those memories. What I do want to say is, when I say dogs have got bad memories of previous grooms, it might not be anything the groomer's actually done, but it's how that dog has interpreted it. So it's like going back to the moth thing I was talking about. Now, if a moth had hit my dad in the face, he probably wouldn't have bothered about it at all. It wouldn't have been any issue for him, but it was an issue for me. So something as tiny as a moth is really negative for me, but might not be for somebody else. It's like, you know, some people don't mind spiders, some do. And it's not up to us to decide what's okay for the dog and what they should or shouldn't be bothered about. So it's not the time, when I say things like that, it's not the time blaming the groomer for actually doing anything wrong. It's just something that dog has taken as a negative. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And, I keep relating it back to a lot of the stuff I've done myself with like counselling and stuff like that through the parasympathetic nerve and the sympathetic nerve, and the anxiety. And if you're anxious, we can't tell our pets to take deep breaths to start relieving
Exactly.
to start getting rid of the sympathetic nerve, can we? But it's exactly the same, isn't it? And I didn't realise that dogs had the same the same issues in a way, like those nervous systems that we do, and we treat people exactly the same. You can't tell dogs to breathe deeply and count and stuff like that, can we?
Exactly, and I mean, even with people, sometimes if you're in that, if you're a person that suffers from panic attacks, if somebody tries to touch you or cuddle you when you're having a panic attack, you're likely to just punch them in the face, aren't you? Let's be honest, if you've ever had a panic attack, I used to have them and I just didn't want anybody touching me at all. I just wanted to be left alone. And it's very similar, that's probably why I'm a bit more understanding of how the dog might be feeling.
Yeah, sort of tuned into it because you understand it from your own kind of perspective.
Yeah. And again, this is something that should be taught before that even people pick a pair of scissors up when they're doing the grooming training. I personally think they should all have to do a certain level of dog behaviour that covers if it's just the basics, and then they can go on to do other courses as well if they want. But just to know about the basics of dog behaviour would be such a huge thing in the industry.
And I think probably a lot of customers probably think or believe that, the pet groomer has actually got a knowledge of dog behaviour as well, I should think. It probably comes as assumed by a lot of customers.
Well, up until 6 years ago, I was just a dog owner that took one of my dogs to the groomers now and again. And I just automatically assumed they would know about dog behaviour. So when I collected my dog sometimes, they'd say, he's been absolutely fine. And then, of course, when I started grooming him, I thought, he's not fine. He doesn't like the blaster. He doesn't like the dryer. He doesn't like his nails clipped. But obviously, the groomer who had done it before had missed all those signs that I picked up quite easily. So it's just a no-brainer for me. And I appreciate it's the fact that I'd got all the dog behaviour knowledge before I started grooming.
And then tell us a bit about the Tellington T-Touch as well. Is that sort of more handling, isn't it, rather than the sort of the psychological side of things?
Yeah, it's doing there's three main sorts of touches we do. We do touches that are circular, we do lifts of the skin, and we do slides, which is basically a stroke. And it's about different positionings on your hand and how you hold your hand and how you touch the dog with your hand. So it can look a bit like massage, but it releases tension. It makes the dog feel more balanced. It improves the proprioception. So some dogs I've noticed have got really poor proprioception, so they don't know where the back end is in relation to the front end. And obviously, when they've got them in the bath or on the table then, and they're not sure where the back end is, and you've picked the front paw up, they feel unbalanced and unsteady. So by improving the proprioception with T-Touch, it gives them much better feeling of confidence in themselves. So it's really good for things like separation anxiety. It can reduce stress. One of the touches in particular, which is ear slides, which is basically just stroking the dog's ears like that, which many of us do anyway. That can keep a dog from going into shock if it's had an accident. Ear strokes again, and it's really good for dogs that get travel sickness. So there's many areas that we can use T-Touch in. And it's just like a little bit, as I said, it's just like a little bit of massage, but it's not a deep rub, whereas it's just moving the skin over whatever's underneath. but it has a really calming effect on the dogs. It's I was looking. I did a.
I was going to say,
Sorry, go on.
Can you feel the tension in the dogs? Like, you know, if we went to a chiropractor or, you know, had a massage yourself, they'll say, oh, you got a knot in there, or, you know, you're very tense around that. Can you feel that in the dogs with T-Touch?
Yeah. Obviously, we don't just go straight and do T-Touch on the dogs. We want to know the areas that's a little bit more sensitive, the areas where they might have tension. Tension often shows up as a change of heat. So you might stroke over a dog and it's one temperature, and then one area will be really warm or cold. That's an indicator of tension. I do a Russian Terrier, and his skin on his, I'd say from mid-back to his tail, you just can't move the skin. There's no flexibility in the skin. That is tension. You know, when you sometimes touch a dog in a particular place, it'll scratch itself. Mm-hmm. That's usually tension, and skin twitches, that usually indicates tension as well. So by doing a little bit of T-Touch on those areas, you might not be able to get rid of the tension in that one session, but it might be enough to be able to groom it without, you know, I've got one dog that if I touched halfway down his back, his whole skin would twitch. But if I did some T-Touch before I used the clippers, that was enough to stop his skin twitching. I just clipped him off. So it's really useful. There's different touches you can use on the legs to make them a little bit less sensitive about having the legs picked up. A lot of work around the mouth can really relax them. I do a lot of mouth work, working around the mouth before I actually scissor faces, especially on the squidgy faces like the Shih Tzus and the Lhasas. They're really good with T-Touch work around the head before you start scissoring them.
This is something that you do with the dog every time they come in. So if you did like the dog with the tight sort of back, you'd have to do that every time that the dog came in before you did the clippering, or is it something that eventually the tension sort of leaves?
Because I only see him every 6 weeks, because he's just a grooming client rather than a T-Touch client. It's probably something I'm going to have to do every time. He's 8 years old. He's a rescue. As the next breeding dog, so there's lots of baggage there before he went to the home he's with now. He's been there about 18 months now. If I had him on probably a 2 weekly basis, I could probably relieve a lot of that tension, but only doing it once every 6 weeks is not going to relieve that tension enough, but it's enough for me to be able to get the groom done. And then, of course, because I know he's got that tension in his back end, I've told that to the guardians as well, so they know to be a little bit more careful around that area, because it's likely to be a bit more, my mind's just gone totally blank, a little bit more tender than the rest of his body.
And so you say you actually offer the T-Touch sessions as well as grooming, so people can actually bring their pets to you to go through the T-Touch treatment, but not without a groom, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they can do, but I don't tend to take much. To be quite honest, I made a decision about just before COVID, actually, because I was getting so many grooming clients with issues around grooming. I hadn't got time to do the behaviour stuff as well, or the T-Touch. I've got 3 other T-Touch practitioners within a 5-mile radius. I've got lots of really good behaviourist friends, again, in that same radius. So I decided, because I'm the only groomer in my area that uses these techniques, that I would just take on the grooming clients and refer the other dogs to my colleagues in the area that could do the behaviour work but couldn't do the grooming.
I see.
And then COVID hit.
Well, yeah, and puts a hole in a few things, doesn't it? But hopefully we'll back up and running now. So when you go back over and say about, you know, touching a dog in a certain place and it scratches, so we've got 2 Dachshunds. They lay in their bed and one will chew the other one's ear. Is that anything particular that you can just disgusting, dirty dogs. They're literally like, they'll just suck on each other's ears and chew them and suck them. And it's pretty foul when you go to stroke them. But
that could be like a transferring of the odours. So, but it all could, if they're actually sucking as well, that could be a soothing thing for them as well. Sucking's anything around the mouth. So licking is really soothing for dogs. Chewing treats, chewing on bones can be very soothing for them as well, because the mouth area is connected to the limbic system. So anything that releases tension around the mouth will have an effect on the limbic system as well. So I would imagine it's all to do with, they find it quite comforting to suck on each other's ears.
It's pretty disgusting when you go to stroke them. You're like, oh, you've been like,
oh, I can imagine.
But we at the weekend I bought them some toys, because like the younger one, Rose, is like, she'll steal anything like flannels and underwear and run around the house. So like, right, they definitely need some toys. So we got them some nice toys. Destroyed, but already completely destroyed. Squeakers ripped out, fluff all ripped out. It's like, go back to your ears. Yeah. So some dogs will automatically just shred everything they get. Others, I've got 2 Cocker Spaniels. They love soft toys, and the only time I've noticed my youngest one, he just loves to carry them. He doesn't chew them. He just loves to carry them around. But my old one, when I lost my previous working cocker, he got killed in a road accident. He spent 2 weeks just shredding all his toys. So for him, it's a stress reliever. So what can we do with what do you do with your pets in the salon? Do you, obviously, I'm assuming you work one-to-one with them. So as soon as they're like finished and they're going home, or is there things that we can do within the salon once we've got pets with us to sort of make it a nice environment for them?
Okay, there's a few things now. I'm really good at talking about how we can manage it on a one-to-one, because that's how I work. And I know working in a multi-groomer salon is a little bit more difficult. So in a one-to-one grooming environment, it's all about thinking of the actual environment to start off with. So I keep all my products low aroma. I love organic, because the smell of their products is so, I want to say discreet, that's not quite the word. The really low aroma, so we're not overloading the dog with strong perfume shampoos. It's about thinking of the noise in the salon as well. So if you have your radio on, don't have it blaring, because there's already a lot for the dog to process. I don't use safety aids. I also have to laugh when I say that, because I think I always work without a safety net. But I have my table set on its lowest setting, so it's probably about that far off the floor. And then I've got a little stool I sit on. And I've got a set of caravan steps that I put carpet on, so the dogs can get on and off the table as they want. So they don't have to jump off the table. Even the little dogs can walk up and down the steps. So that takes all the risk out of them falling off the table or jumping off the table. So when I say I don't use safety aids, it's not as bad as it sounds. I'm not putting them on a full height table and taking the safety aids off. So other things you can do is make sure you calm yourself, because if you're stressed, the dog will pick up on that and get stressed themselves, thinking, well, because I've seen some videos of groomers and they're doing this, they're putting them around and then pulling it away. So that straight away tells the dog that you're really unsure of what you're doing, and it doesn't instill confidence in them. So try and come across as knowing what you're doing. I keep my voice very calm. I don't raise my voice if they do something silly. I just let it go, because if they've done something silly or they've done something, if they're like tap dancing around the table, there's a reason for that. That they're not deliberately being a pain. It's just that their sympathetic nervous system's not cooperating, and it's just making them really anxious. So if you prevent the little bit of stress, then you can prevent the big stress where they're likely to bite you.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely learn as much as you can about dog behaviour. Learn about calming signals and trigger stacking. Trigger stacking is a big issue in the grooming salon. There's just so many triggers. I counted up a few weeks ago, and I counted something like 250 triggers without even thinking about it that a dog could find upsetting in the grooming environment. What I've started doing recently, because I've got the online education hub as well now, I video all my grooms so I can watch them back. And there's been a couple of times where a dog's done something that I've not actually acknowledged during the groom. So it's really good to look back and think, actually, I could have done that differently. I could have, used a distraction technique, or I could have just done something a little bit different so they didn't get anxious about it. The biggest thing, I think, is the puppy introduction. If we can start the puppies off on a stress-free grooming journey, then we've got a puppy that's really good, an adult that's really, well, an adolescent that's, and then we've got a really good adult. I want to talk a little bit about adolescence, actually, because that is when we start to see the biggest issues with most dogs. They'll come for the puppy grooms, their introductions and that. And then when they get to about 8 or 9 months, that's it. They don't want touching. That's when they start getting a little bit snarly, a little bit reactive. And it's because they're just like teenagers, really. They're going through lots of body changes. They can have touch sensitivity. The brain's changing. Their hormones are changing. And I was just listening a few weeks ago to Sarah Fisher talking about adolescence, and it was something I think we all sort of know, but we don't actually acknowledge it. Is when any mammal reaches adolescence, the body is preparing them to live independently. So that's why a lot of adolescent children suddenly won't let you give them a kiss or won't let you give them a hug, because it's part of their growing up that they've got to start to be independent. So touching is physical contact, not something that their nervous system wants, because they're preparing to live independently. Now, I know dogs don't live independently, but they would if there weren't any, like the street dogs, they live independently. And when they get to adolescence, they go through the same things and then learn to cope on their own. So really be careful around adolescence, because that is the time. If you've got a puppet and you've got it to adolescence and it's really good on the table, just be careful that you don't inadvertently overwhelm around that area, because then you've got an adult dog that really doesn't like grooming. So your adolescents, really baby them.
What age do you call what do you say is adolescence? What's your sort of puppy, adolescence, and adult definition?
I would say adolescence can start anywhere between about 5 and 10, 11 months, and it can last for about 6 to 12 months for some dogs, some breeds. So it usually coincides with the 3rd and 4th groom, and that's the time. You see a lot of posts, I've had this dog in 3 times before he's been perfect. This time he's trying to rip my head off. And that's why it is. It's because they're adolescents. They're so overwhelmed by adolescence without any grooming or any contact taking place.
Or it might actually be the time where they're actually starting to change dog groomers, because maybe one groomer said, I can't handle this one, and then they go to another one, and you're then presented with an adolescent dog that's confused, probably.
Yeah, I mean, over the last really, to coincide with COVID, nearly all the dogs that have been referred to me are adolescent, and the behaviour has escalated really quickly. So they've gone from one groom to being this perfect little dog to the next groom starting to get a little bit grumbly and growly to the groom after that. So within the space of 2 or 3 grooms, they've gone from being a really good dog to groom to a dog that just wants to bite.
So in your practice, Sorry, go on.
Sorry. So it's really important to educate the guardians as well about how the dog's body is changing as well, and how they can help at home, because there's lots of things the guardians can do at home to help. But then you've got the groomer hoppers anyway that go to a different groomer each time. So the dog's never going to get settled into a grooming salon if it's constantly being moved.
We got some questions stacking up. I've just got a question that I just thought of. And in your salon, in your practice, do you use all the normal equipment that we would use? Do you use the blaster dryers, the clippers, the scissors? You know, is there any specialist equipment that you buy?
Not any specialist equipment. I sold my blaster after about 18 months because I only used it on 2 dogs, and one of those dogs passed away. I couldn't use it on any other dog that I groomed, not with the knowledge I had. So I sold my blaster and I bought a Dyson airdryer, one of the little Dyson air dryers that you use on our own hair. I don't use on my hair, I just keep it in the salon. It's a lot quieter. The sound's slightly different to a normal dryer as well. So for a lot of dogs, I use the Dyson airdryer. And it's actually, it might sound as if it's not going to dry as quick, but for a lot of the dogs I groom, I can get the Dyson dryer right up to them close, whereas the big finishing dryer, have to keep that away from them because it's too much for them. So it's actually quicker drying most dogs with a Dyson airdryer than it is with the full, the finishing dryer. I don't own, in fact I do, I own 2 muzzles. But one's a great big giant one and one's about this big, and it's just because somebody gave them to me. I don't use things like calming cradles, groomers helpers, because I want the dog to be as free in its body movements as possible. So a lot of the tools we're taught to use prevent a lot of the calming signals. They prevent the dog being able to turn away. It means they can't do a proper shake off, because that can also help calm them as well. And it just makes it a little bit more difficult for them. The one thing I would say that I do recommend, if you don't want to groom on a low table, so you'll need safety aids, is to, instead of using a collar, use a harness type of thing. So it takes all the pressure off the neck, because if you think about it, if you feel stressed yourself, the last thing you want is something tight around your neck. And a lot of groomers I've recommended, I use a Tellington T-touch harness if I ever need anything. And people I've recommended, other groomers I've recommended the harness to, they say the dog, it's an obvious change in the dog's body language straight away. They look much more relaxed, not having the loop around the neck. The other thing I've noticed on a lot of, particularly in some of the trainee groups, the safety aids are used far too tightly, particularly the belly band. So the safety aids are there as just safety. They're not there to restrain the dog. It's just to keep them on the table. So have them as loose as you can manage without the dog falling or being able to jump off the table. So they're just little things that you can change quite quickly and make a big difference for the dogs that you groom. Okay,
so like I said, we'll start going through some of the questions, if that's okay. And one of them is around that kind of idea is if the dog you allow the dog to come off the table, don't you? And I'm assuming that's just to say, I need a break. I've had enough for a minute. I'll go and, like you said, go to the door. There's no one kicking around. Then I'll come back onto the table. Do you? The question is, do you encourage the dog to come back to the table, or do you just wait for it to do its thing? And if it doesn't choose to come back, how do you finish the groom? Do you send it home, and how do you then charge for that groom that you've done?
Okay, so most of the dogs in fact, I don't think I've had one that's ever refused to get back on the table. Sometimes it might need a treat to get them back on the table, but most of them will come back and just get on. The little one I did this month, Bichon, I did this morning. All I have to do for him is just call his name and he comes back on the table. Some I just tap the table and they'll come and get straight back on. But I'd say the ones that are a little bit more reluctant, it's just a treat on the table and let them get back on. So they sort to learn that being on the table means grooming is going to take place. Off the table, the grooming stops. So that gives them the ability to give me consent to groom them.
And then there's a positivity with that treat as well, isn't there?
Yeah. There's, like anything, there's downsides to food, but there's a lot more positives than there are downsides. But just giving that reward for them to coming back for a start, but that create a positive environment. So before I get any dog on the table, I'll do lots of work around the table, teach them how to use the steps, using treats and shaping, so that they're confident on getting on and off the table before I start the grooming on the table. So they know that table means it's a good thing it's been on the table, because you sometimes get food, you get a bit of fuss, you get lots of praise. Being off the table means any contact stops and you give them freedom. But I'll still sometimes just sprinkle treats on the floor as well, because I don't want them to be conflicted, because with some dogs, they'll override their emotions to get the treats. So they'll override their fear, but actually they're still feeling quite, I don't know. It's like me. If somebody asked me to walk through a room of spiders to get a bar of chocolate, I'd probably run through it to get the bar of chocolate. So we have to think about those things as well. But in general, I find food quite useful for me. And if you are going to use a low table, do it at the beginning of a groom. Don't wait till the dog's already stressed to start putting the dog on the floor or using a low table, because by that time they're too anxious to be able to learn anyway. So start the beginning of your session with your table low. Make sure you've got a safe way for the dog to get on and off the table. So if you've got big dogs, they can usually step on and off the low table. But as I say, I've got steps now, so little dogs can get on and off themselves as well.
So do you have like a specific time for your grooms, or because we're doing it with their consent, we're taking it at their pace. How do you then run your diary?
So I only tend to do a maximum of 3 dogs a day anyway, and some days I only do 2. Today I've only done 1 because I've got all the other stuff I do as well. I don't want to be grooming 24/7. But to be honest, using the grooming the way I do, I can probably get most grooms done a lot faster than if I got them on a full height table with all the safety aids on, using all the right equipment. One of the Cockapoos I do, in fact, nearly all the Cockapoos I can do in an hour and a half. And that's not rushing. That's just taking it nice and steady, letting the dog on and off the table. To be honest, a lot of people get confused about this, being able to get on and off the table. They think they'll be on and off, on and off, on and off. They don't. I've got some dogs that don't get off the table the whole groom, because they know they've got the choice to do it if they need to. It just keeps them a lot calmer, and they just let me do the whole groom without getting off the table. Some, I've got one, he'll probably get off 5 or 6 times, but again, he just gets off, goes to the door, has a look, then comes back straight, and I don't even have to call him back. And he's probably one of my most anxious dogs I groom. So he's learned now that when he just needs that moment, he just gets off the table, goes and looks to see if his owners have come back, then come back on the table. So charging wise, I charge for the appointment time. So it's, if say, for example, if it's an hour, I'll charge £30. If I only do a half grooming in that hour, it's still £30. Because what I tend to do, if it's more with dogs that have only just started to come to me, if I get partway through the groom and they can't cope with him anymore, I'll give them 10-15 minutes with licky mats, snuffle mats, and then I'll start to do, as I notice their body language softening and they're becoming more relaxed, I'll start doing a little bit of training with them as well. So that gives them a positive end to the groom as well. So, you know, a little bit more teaching down and off the table. I might start to train a chin rest where they rest their muzzle in my hand. Because I don't hold things like the chin area either. I just can't do that. So I teach all my dogs that while the chin's in my hand, I'll trim the face. When they move it, I stop. And again, that gives them more freedom. So because they know they've got the choice, they tend to keep it in place a lot longer.
Yeah,
and then I've got the dogs that do this big debate.
Yeah. I mean, I always pick on Cockapoos. Is there a particular breed that you see you're working with a lot, or?
Cockapoos.
Yeah. Okay.
Cockapoos and Spaniels, Cocker Spaniels.
They're just highly strung.
So I think there's a bit of a link there.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so I do pick on Cockapoos quite a bit. And I think a lot of people see that in their salons, and they see that they can be a real nightmare. And some of them can be quite big as well.
Yeah. I've just took one on that's obviously crossed with a standard poodle rather than a miniature or a toy. He's a big lad.
Yeah.
But he's gone from he's one that came to me during adolescence, and he'd gone from being okay being groomed to biting the groomer. I've had him come to me about 5 times now, and he's got some major triggers. It was a rescue dog. He was put into kennels about 5 months old because the previous owners couldn't cope with him. So he's been rehomed now, and the lovely people have got him now. But towels, I can't use a towel near him. If I pick a towel up to go to dry him, that is a massive trigger for him. So it's things like that I've had to adapt for him. I've got some of the rough and tumble dry mitts that pull on, you know, come up to about here on your hands, and the really thick toweling. He'll let me use those for so long, but even those, it's not too much. To make matters worse, he doesn't like the dryer, so we're having to work. We're having to work with desensitizing the dryer. He doesn't like his legs being touched because he had a grass seed in his leg, and he had to have surgery on that. So that's another trigger for him. So it's working out all his triggers and how I can make it easy for them not to be such an issue for him. So
do you sometimes
if we don't think, sorry.
Do you sometimes get dogs in that come with families, and you're a bit concerned about like children being around, and they might bite the children and things like that?
I've not had one in the grooming. I did do a behaviour visit about 2.5 years ago, and that was a staffy cross with a child, and I was actually quite concerned about that. So I did tell the guardian that I didn't think it was the right home. It's very difficult to tell somebody that the dog they love is not in the right home, but sometimes you have to do it from a professional point of view. It would have been unprofessional of me not to have said that. So sometimes we have to put feelings aside and tell it how it is.
Yeah.
So all she actually did was just went to a different behaviourist.
Yes. We can educate people so much, can't we?
Yeah.
So let's try and get through some of these questions. So T-touch sounds interesting. How can we learn how to do T-touch?
Okay, so I'm currently in the process of putting an online tutorial together for T-touch. I've got my online monthly platform that you can subscribe to, and that already has T-touch on including calming signals, trigger stacking, the autonomous nervous system, the free work I was talking about, handling. It's got loads of information, and each month I upload a little bit more. But that's already got the T-touch element added into it. and that's £18 a month at the moment. But if you talk to me nicely, I might give you a discount code. And if you think about it, if it's £18 a month, it's about, what is it, £200 a year. What courses can you go on for £200 that's going to give you a year's worth of videos and knowledge, and probably make the difference between you getting bitten and not getting bitten? So, if you look at it in terms of dogs, what is it, 5 grooms? It's I've got quite a few members as well, and the feedback's been really good. So.
That's good. We'll put the
but I will be doing a bit, just put the link in.
Yeah, we'll grab the links from you about that, so people can look at that. And is it me I've got to talk to you nicely for a discount code?
Yes. Yeah, I'll put the discount code in the chat.
Excellent. That's what we like to hear. So I've asked you that one. I'm just going through the questions. So someone said, if you've got an adolescent dog, is it a good idea to actually split the grooming sessions up, say into 2 sessions, so that they don't get too overwhelmed with the grooming?
Anything you can do to stop them getting overwhelmed. So, for example, if you've noticed they're a bit wary of the clippers, scissor. I've got quite a few dogs that can't tolerate the clippers, so I scissor them. I've got a few dogs that can't tolerate the scissors. I did a little Shih Tzu last night, and he just freaks out if I get the scissors any near him, but he'll let me clip all over. Paying attention to the individual dog, what they can cope with. So what I've started to do now with a few of my clients is the guardians bath them in the morning or the night before. That negates the need to bath and dry them, and then they can cope with the clipping off. I mean, we couldn't do that during COVID, before we knew that dogs can't actually transmit COVID on the coats. But if you just talk to the guardians, good quality shampoo, ask them not to shampoo, not to take them out, obviously, but just, they'll come in the afternoon, they'll bath the dog in the morning. By the time it comes to me, it's dry. And all I do is clip it off and make that easier for them. But yeah, if you've got an adolescent dog that doesn't like pretty much all the groom, then one week do its face, another week do its torso, the week after do its legs, and just break it down just so that it's not getting too overwhelmed. And it doesn't mean, what I do with dogs that are having more frequently, I just book half an hour slot so that I can keep it cost effective for the clients as well, because I'm not going to charge a full hour's fee for half an hour.
And it is as much educating them at times as well, isn't it? As well as the dog.
Definitely. I'm actually quite lucky, but because the time most guardians get to me now is they're desperate. They just need somebody to be able to work with their dog, to be able to groom their dog. So it's rare I get. Most of my clients now are long-term clients. They'll come and they'll stay with me. It's not like they'll come for 1 or 2 and then never bother. I do get a few of those, but it's only probably I'll get 1 of those a year. So it's a really good way to build up your client base and keep those clients as well. So it makes good business sense, because you don't want you don't want your books to be different dogs every 6 months. You want to have the same dogs to be able to work with, to build up a good relationship, to build up that trust, just to make your life easier. So it's the guardian, definitely the owners that I've got, they're so grateful all the time. And sometimes I don't get a perfect finish. Certainly wouldn't win Pooch perfect. But the guardians are just so happy with what I've managed to achieve, and I've got one that every time, his little Shih Tzu, and every time he comes out, oh, don't you look gorgeous? And she really fusses, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't know what dog you're looking at, because it's not the one I'm looking at. So I think as groomers, we're our biggest critics. We expect, we want every dog to go out with not an hair out of place. But more often than not, the owners are just pleased for anything I can do with a lot of dogs. And because a lot of guardians stay as well, because they see how I groom, how I handle their dogs, so that they continue that work at home as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like I'm doing something in the salon and then they're going home and doing something completely different. So that helps as well, because we're keeping it consistent between us both.
Yeah, definitely. And so another question coming in. If you've got dogs that aren't food orientated, I've never heard of one of those in my house. The 2 Labradors and the Dachshunds are all very food orientated. But do you use toys instead to, you were talking about the positive rewards and stuff like that. Do you use toys instead?
Definitely use what they like. Some dogs will eat food, but they actually like a ball better or like to play a little bit of tuggy. I've got a Labrador that I'm having to desensitize the dryer. She doesn't like the dryer. And we just have an awesome game of tuggy with her on the floor while the dryer's on. She's running underneath the dryer, completely oblivious to the dryer's on her. I can use food for her because she's a Labrador, but I find she gets overexcited with the food and she's trying to she mugs me for the food. So makes it much calmer for her to play with the ball rather than have lots of food. There's several reasons why dogs don't appear to be food motivated, particularly when it's not your dog and it's in a strange environment. It could be that if it's a morning appointment, it's had a full breakfast and not hungry. It could be it doesn't like the treats you're using, or it could be that they're too overwhelmed, they're too stressed to be able to eat. So always ask those 3 questions. If you've got a dog in early in the morning and you'd like to use food, just ask the guardian to cut the food portion, the breakfast down a little bit, so they're still a little bit hungry when they come into the salon. I'll only use natural treats. I don't use things like pedigree chews or anything. So lots of natural chews, fishy type treats, anything that's really smelly, because that will get the juices, should we say. Different types of treats as well. Some dogs, last night, the little dog I had in last night, I've got crunch treats. I've got 2 or 3, because I also have about 4 or 5 different sorts of treats in my salon. Turned his nose to put 4. The 5th one, which was a venison stick, cut up very finely. He absolutely adored that. So don't just stick to one sort of treat. Have lots of treats, just in case it's that treat. That might be the magic treat. And again, for some dogs, they like to lick instead. So things like Primula cheese, doggy peanut butter, as long as nobody's got allergies around it. I use 4th grade dog food quite a lot as well, because that's high quality, but it's something they can lick as well. Often I find that stress is usually the biggest issue around dogs not being able to eat in the salon now. But definitely use whatever the dog finds as a reward.
Whether our Labrador eats or not is kind of like, do we take it to the vets or not? For us, what's the scale of porniness for our Labrador? Is she eating? Yes, she's fine. She's fine.
She's fine. Yeah, Labradors will eat through anything.
So a few comments coming in. So I can highly recommend Educational Hub. There you go. I have both your books, Sue. Do you have a discount code to bulk buy you're taking the public issue of taking the grower out of grooming? And I was thinking exactly the same about this, because we've just introduced a puppy package, and I was thinking, you know what, giving a free copy of your book to each puppy owner is probably a really good idea to go with our package, isn't it?
Well, I am actually in the final stages of doing a dedicated puppy version for the guardians, so it doesn't include a lot of the correction of, because my taking the girl out of grooming your dog has got a lot of things about ACE-free work, a lot of counter conditioning and trust-based techniques, and I'm doing a reduced version of that for puppies. That because I've got a lot of dog behaviourist friends, trainers that have just want something to put in the puppy packages, like you said. So that should be there. That should be ready about March time. But in the meantime, yes, if you want to bulk buy the books, they sell on Amazon at $9.99. If you want 5+ copies, I'll do them for £6.50 per copy. If you again, I'll put a code on so I know that they've picked them up. So you can make £3.50 on each one if you want to sell it, or just up your price of your puppy packages a little bit more to cover the cost of them. But you wouldn't believe, I love giving the books out because I'll give you help one during the first session, and then they'll come back the second and third session. Oh, I was just brushing his paws yesterday and he licked his lips, or he turned his head away. And it's obvious that then they're starting to think about looking for those calming signals and thinking about how they can make life a little bit easier for the dogs. So it's not only just in the grooming environment, but generally in life, that these calming signals and trigger stacking is really important.
Yeah, and I think a little top tip, if you're going to supply the book with your puppy package, but don't actually tell your customers that they get a book. So it's a really nice surprise when they turn up with their puppy, and at the end of their first meet, say, it's been lovely to meet your pup, and by the way, here's a gift on us, a book all about how to help your puppy with grooming. So
yeah. And obviously, if they're using the same techniques as you're using, it's just going to make it, the puppy, it's so much easier when the guardians help you. It's, you know, it's it's really difficult if the guardian doesn't buy into the way you groom and doesn't brush the dog. Hand on heart, all the dogs that come to me, it's rare they've got a mat, because they've read my book, they know how to groom. Sorry? Even the Cockapoos. Even the Cockapoos come in fully groomed each time. I've got a little Maltese that I groom, and I've groomed her since a puppy, and I put her into an Asian fusion now. And to be able to do that, you know, it's not perfect Asian fusion, but it's the owner absolutely loves it. So and she's never got as much as a tiny mat, you know, she's not even got like a little snag. So it just makes it easier, as we all know, if you've got a dog with a freshly brushed coat that's not got any, it's so much easier to clip them, it's so much easier for the dog. You're not pulling on max and having to get your 7F out every time.
That's it, exactly the same when I have get my hair cut. So another question: to access your educational hub, is that on like a portal website or YouTube? How do they get hold of?
Yeah, it's on I use Thinkific, which is an educational platform. So you'll just get you just get onto the internet, put the site in, and it comes up. You put your password in and straight in. I am actually starting to put some of the create a Facebook group at the side a bit as well, putting some of the information on that so that we can have more interactive group chats about it as well.
And what's the address to go and purchase the course and access it?
I'll have to put the link in, because if I don't give it you right, you won't get onto it. So I'll put the link in the comments so that you can just go onto that, and I'll also put a discount code in for that and a discount code in for the book as well.
Yeah, everyone's loving that idea of supplying books with their puppy packages. So that's a good idea. They can find the Taking the Girl Out of Grooming on Amazon by the sounds of it. Anyway, they
can, but it's $9.99 on Amazon. If you buy direct from me for between 1 and 4 copies, it's £8.65. But if you buy 5+, I'll do it for $6.50 for the next couple of months.
Excellent. Another testimonial here for you. I found some of the conventional grooming methods difficult. Then I came across Sue's website. Her methods have really made a difference to both the dogs and I groom and my enjoyment of grooming, which is really important, isn't it?
Oh,
They're happier and calmer, which in turn makes my life easier. I haven't finished yet. So big shout out for Sue. I can highly recommend her methods, books, and educational hub. I have to scroll back through the comments to tell you who wrote that. So Joy, Joy, yeah. So what we'll do is we'll come to an end because we've taken up a lot of your time. But thank you for all your time. And
well, I could talk all night.
Are you going to do an audiobook? Are you going to turn taking the Go out of grooming into an audiobook?
Probably. I've got a friend that's interested in doing it for me, but she's got some health issues, so she has to do a little bit when she's well enough to do it. So, but yes, that's definitely on the cards to bring the audiobook out as well.
Excellent.
I've just seen somebody. How much do you charge for the groomer's version?
Yeah,
and that's it's £18.50 on Amazon, and it's, if you buy it direct from me, only in the UK, it's £17.65. But again, I might put a discount on this one as well if you buy it direct from me.
Awesome.
From your group.
So make sure.
But yeah,
all these links are going to go into the chat here. So that they can access the websites and the discount codes and everything, can't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just loads and loads of thank you. Sorry?
Yeah, I must admit, I do really enjoy seeing how other groomers change as well, and how much they feel more confident about grooming dogs. And a lot of it is communicating with the guardians as well, than not to expect this perfect dog when it comes out, that you're more interested in making sure the dog's calm and enjoying it, so that in 2 or 3 grooms time you can go from having an average trim to a really good trim, because it's easier to groom a dog that's calm than it's one that's whirling dervish around the table. I've also got a Facebook group as well, which is Taking the Go Out of Grooming Dogs. Again, I'll put the link in for that as well. And that's where you can say, I've got this devil of a dog in today. How can I help?
Definitely. And, and I think just as important as well is the Joy saying that, it makes grooming enjoyable for her as well. Because there's a lot of groomers out there that struggle a bit with seeing all these dogs, and they get a bit of compassion fatigue and hard work, isn't it, grooming? So.
Yeah, and I must admit, I think because of the dogs I groom are on that really high end of the scale of anxiety, that's why I don't do 20, 30 dogs a week, because I'd be mentally exhausted. I don't get physically exhausted by battling a dog on the table, but when you see some of them and how stressed they are about grooming, I just want to cry with them. So it is a bit emotionally draining some days.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone's loving it by looking at the comments. So we will be putting this out onto.
Oh, no, thank you for having me along.
Yeah, it's fine. And we'll be putting this out onto YouTube, and then it'll go out as a podcast. If you're watching this on replay, then just please put replay in the comments so we know you've seen it. And I'll nudge Sue to put all of her links into the comments after this chat. So thank you very much.
You're
Take
welcome.
care.
I hope everybody's enjoyed it and it's given food for thought.
Yeah, it looks like everyone's enjoying it by the looks of it. So great. Thank you.
Excellent.